veteran news anchor Brian Williams had some advice for the Democrats for how they handled this year's election. This is what Williams said during an interview with NBC's late-night host Seth Meyers last week. Let's watch.
It is tough love time for the Democratic Party. I think it needs to be stripped down and rebuilt. I think that means a change in leadership. I want to know who thought it was a good idea that Joe Biden stand for another 4 years at 80 years of age and 37% popularity. So then that saddled the party with a British-like short campaign season for them. I think it's insulting when members of the working class, which the Democratic Party has lost entirely in our lifetimes, to insist the economy's doing great. A 12-pack of Bounty is $40. Rich folks don't feel that. Poor folks already switched to Sparkle during the COVID, during the lockdown. And I think telling them that the NASDAQ is gangbusters is further insulting. It's insulting. I think the biggest unforced error of the Biden administration by far was the border. To tell people it's not a problem is insulting. For the working class to see incoming migrants getting welcome bags, debit cards, and motel rooms is probably insulting as well. So there's a lot of work to do.
The ex-NBC anchor also made some interesting comparisons between quinoa and the Democratic Party. Let's listen.
You know, it was when they handed out camo hats that said Harris Walls, and the Democrats they were kind of charmed by that. Their party has gone quinoa, and the rest of America's eating at Cracker Barrel. And so it was kind of an ironic use of something millions of Americans put on their heads to start their day every day.
I like quinoa just fine.
I knew you would find some way to take the contrarian view on all of this. So I like Brian Williams. I know we often criticize mainstream media figures on this show, and
he looked good.
He did look good, and I liked his popped collar jacket and all of that. But like I liked him as an anchor. I know there was the now infamous controversy when he made false statements about a helicopter ride years and years ago. It was a big media scandal. I think he's a very good anchor. I, even as someone who likes him a lot, would not have anticipated that one of the, to my mind, best critiques of the Democratic Party in this election would come from Brian Williams. I agree with pretty much everything he said there. Yeah. I think that it was really, and it is really important, to emphasize the degree to which the Democratic Party seemed to lose touch with working class voters who had been the bedrock of the Democratic Party traditionally, and how it had sought to minimize issues that are really legitimately important to people. And he mentioned immigration, which I think among the sort of DNC type elite Democrats the assumption tends to be that anyone who's concerned about it is a nativist or a racist. Nativists and racists exist, but lots of people are concerned about those record numbers we saw late last year, the strain it places on infrastructure, all of that, and I think it's a legitimate point.
Yeah, public opinion is just so overwhelmingly, its public opinion is to my right on this issue. Right. I'm the right of center host on this show. Right. There's a desire to do something about it, and in terms of the economy as well, and they never really. Well, okay, so a couple things. One thing. It is astonishing and quite an accomplishment that Trump has managed to make the Republican Party more better liked by working people, or at least Trump is liked by working people. There's some question if Trump were to, disappear, vanish into thin air tomorrow, right, whether the Republican Party would retain the loyalty of the working class. I could see arguments in both directions, mostly without wholly changing the political agenda of the Republican Party. I mean, we are right. We're going to see what kind of policies come forth because he has assembled a cabinet, we talked about that earlier in the show, that has a range of kind of ideological views. I would say that they're more united. What is the common thread is that they are effective communicators for Trump on cable news and on social media, that they have entertainment and star power themselves. There's not necessarily ideological consistency, right, or consistency in backgrounds at all. Right. The backgrounds are all over the place. Sure. The through line is that they are effective communicators in the medium that Trump values, TV, social media, etc. But we have to still see what the policies are going to look like, and if they're going to address working class issues. That's clear. I think the working class, rightly or wrongly, thinks immigration is having a bad impact on their own economic reality in terms of competition for jobs and wages. There's that argument in addition to the crime and kind of social unrest. The immigration argument that most resonates with me, or that I think is probably most valid, is the swamping of social services in places where they've been forced to forced to congregate, and I see why that would irritate hardworking, tax-paying Americans. The economic impacts of immigration are debated by economists, and they'll point to generally good things resulting for the economy with the free flow of labor, just like the free flow of any other resource. But on the the lowest end, you do obviously have an impact on the competition for wages. So that is an issue where I think Trump is actually wants to address a tangible concern of the voters, to the extent that they care, and I agree with Brian Williams that they do, about the high cost of goods and services. I think Dems could have hammered Trump on, aren't tariffs going to just result in all those things becoming more expensive? But they didn't really make that case because they themselves have tariffs and believe in tariffs to some degree.
Absolutely. And, I think there are massive question marks over whether Trump's policies will actually help the lot of working class Americans. But I do think it is really important, just to get back to William's point and to other people who make a similar point, there is this sense that the Democratic Party, in many of its policies and sensibilities, is now driven by very affluent, very highly educated people, to whom something like a rise in unauthorized immigration is not really that personally dangerous. In other words, someone who comes across the border undocumented from Guatemala is not generally going to be working, with all due respect to them, as a lawyer or a think tank person or a reporter or TV host for that matter. And so the pressure is greatest at the lowest end of the income scale. And just there's so much I could say about this, but just to raise one other point, because we were talking at another point in today's show about a debate between Bill Maher and Neil deGrasse Tyson that hit on the issue of trans rights and all of that. This concentration on what is sometimes called identity politics or social issues is something that I think the Democratic Party has to think very seriously about, because I am old enough to remember when the traditional left position was be wary of the sort of capitalist classes dividing and conquering by focusing on identity at the expense of economic interests. And the whole foundational idea of organized labor is, we might have different skin color, we might be of different gender, we might go to different churches,
but we have common
interests. And that has been, I think, greatly diluted by such a concentration on social issues.
Just to briefly go back to the point you just made about the lower income workers, I do find this fascinating because it is going to be an intellectual debate at some point. Because you can take that argument too far, like we could, on the extreme end, we could ban computers or we could create more jobs for typists again, right? There's creative destruction in the economic sector where jobs phase out because of technological innovation. And if we're always at, if we're willing to pay any cost on the economy at large and society at large to protect and retain some of those jobs, you're going to end up doing things that are economically very nutty from the standpoint of the rest of the country, but might be in the narrow interests of that slice of the labor pool. And I worry about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And you do have, things change. No, there is not going to be some resurgence of steel making in the United States at this point. It's just not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. All right, more Rising still to come. Stay tuned. We've got a lot more to talk about. We'll be back in just a minute.